Ferrari just found a way to unlock their engine, and it could instantly destroy Mercedes' biggest advantage because after 2 races in the 2026 season, Australia and China, the data shows something shocking. Ferrari is already as fast as Mercedes in the corners. In China, they were matching them, even beating them in the technical sector of the track. So why are they still losing? That is where everything changes because Ferrari is not missing speed. They are losing energy at the exact worst moment. And now, just days before the Japanese Grand Prix, they believe they have found the solution. Not a new engine, not a massive upgrade, a way to unlock performance that was already there. Which means one thing. If this works, Ferrari does not just get closer. They become a real threat overnight. So, the real question is no longer if Ferrari can catch Mercedes. The real question is, what happens when Ferrari finally uses their full power? Subscribe now, because what is about to happen in Japan could change everything. At first, Ferrari did not believe they were this close. Because when you look at the results, it tells one story. Mercedes ahead. Ferrari chasing a gap that looks comfortable. But when you look at the data, it tells a completely different one. Because in China, Ferrari was not being outperformed everywhere. In fact, in the most technical part of the track, they were right there. Sector 2, the most complex section. High load, precision, flow. Ferrari was matching Mercedes, even slightly faster at times. And that is the moment everything changes. Because when you are equal in the hardest part of the circuit, you are not lacking performance. You are losing it somewhere else. And Ferrari knew exactly where to look. The straight, but not the beginning, not the middle, the end. That final phase where everything depends on energy. Because that is where the drop happens. That is where the speed disappears. That is where Mercedes pulls away every single lap. And this is what confused Ferrari at first, because their initial deployment looked strong. Acceleration was there. Top speed was competitive. But then something changed. The energy ran out too early. And when that happens, the car becomes vulnerable. Not slightly, completely. Because once the battery drops out of its optimal window, there is no recovery until the next phase. And that costs time. Every straight, every lap, every stint. And suddenly a car that looks competitive becomes one that cannot fight. But here is where the breakthrough happens. Because Ferrari realized something critical. This was not a limitation of the engine. It was a limitation of how the energy was being used, the timing, the deployment curve, the balance between pushing early and sustaining later. And once they saw that, everything started to make sense. What looked like a power deficit was actually a management problem, a calibration problem, a problem that can be fixed. And that is the key because in Formula One, there is a massive difference between something you cannot change and something you have simply not optimized yet. And Ferrari now believes this is the second one, which means something very important. The performance they have shown so far is not their real performance. It is limited, restricted, not fully unlocked. And now, just days before Suzuka, they are preparing to change that. Not by rebuilding the engine, not by introducing a completely new package, but by unlocking what is already inside the car. And that is what makes this so dangerous. Because if they get it right, the gap does not close slowly. It disappears instantly. And this is where the story becomes dangerous for everyone else. Because once Ferrari understood the problem, they realized something even bigger. They have been using their energy in the wrong phase of a lap. Too aggressive at the beginning of the straight, too early in the deployment, which feels fast but kills them at the end. And that is exactly where Mercedes wins. Not by accelerating harder, by lasting longer, by still having energy when everyone else is running out. And that is the difference between looking fast and actually being fast. But here is where Ferrari's discovery changes everything. Because if you shift that deployment, if you delay it, if you control when the power is released, you do not just gain speed. You gain it at the most important moment, the end of the straight, the exact place where overtakes happen, where defenses are made, where races are decided. And suddenly the weakness flips. Because instead of losing time there, Ferrari could start gaining it. But this is not just about pressing the power later. It is about balance. Because if you delay too much, you lose acceleration. If you push too early, you lose the end of the straight. So this becomes a precision game. A fine calibration between energy release and energy survival. And that is where the real complexity appears. Because this is not something you fix with one change. It is software. It is mapping. It is how the engine and battery talk to each other. Every corner, every braking zone, every deployment phase, all connected. And this is why drivers have called this generation the most difficult to manage. Because they are not just driving. They are controlling energy in real time, deciding when to attack, when to save, when to risk everything. And Ferrari believes they now understand that balance. But here is where the tension rises again. Because understanding it is not the same as executing it. Because on track, under pressure, fighting other cars, everything becomes harder. And Suzuka makes it even worse because Suzuka does not give you time to think. High-speed corners, rapid direction changes, constant load. You are always in a critical phase, which means energy management has to be perfect or the entire lap falls apart. But this is exactly why Ferrari is confident. Because if there is one track where energy timing matters more than anywhere else, it is Suzuka. And that means one thing. If their solution is real, we will see it immediately. Not in small details, in clear performance. Stronger exits, better end-of-straight speed, more control in wheel-to-wheel battles. But if it is not, if the calibration is still not right, then the same pattern will repeat. Strong at first, fading later, always close, but never enough. And that is what makes this moment so important. Because Ferrari is not bringing more power, they are bringing better use of power. And in 2026, that is what decides everything. So now everything comes down to one simple but brutal truth. Because when the lights go out in Japan, when the cars hit full speed, when the drivers push to the limit, we will finally see it. Whether Ferrari has just unlocked the performance that was always there, or whether they are about to discover that even perfect energy management is still not enough to beat Mercedes. And this is where everything finally connects. Because what Ferrari has discovered is not just a fix. It is a completely different way of racing. Because up until now, they have been reacting. Reacting to the car, reacting to the energy drop, reacting to Mercedes pulling away, always adjusting but never controlling. But now that changes because once you understand exactly where you are losing energy, you can decide where to win it back. And that is the shift from reaction to control. And in Formula One, control is everything. Because now Ferrari is no longer guessing. They know where to save. They know where to deploy. They know exactly when to hold back and when to attack. And that creates something they did not have before. Consistency. Because the biggest problem they had was not just losing time. It was losing it unpredictably. Different laps, different moments, different situations. And that makes it impossible to build confidence. But if that disappears, if the energy stays in the right window lap after lap, then everything stabilizes. The car becomes predictable. The driver starts trusting it. And once that happens, performance unlocks instantly. But here is where it becomes even more powerful. Because this does not just affect one lap, it affects the entire race.